Coming up next, we have The Beast from the East. So the book starts off with Ginger, her brothers who are twins, and their parents going on a camping trip. And so they wander off pretty immediately, and they come across a weird part of the woods, and then they hear these beasts. And these beasts come around, and they look at them, but then they just walk away, only to return a few chapters later from the other side. And then one of the beasts tags Ginger, says, "Tag, you're it." So the beasts are trying to play a game with them, and the game is called The Beast from the East. And so now Ginger is the beast from the East. So the rules are extremely vague, which helps to add to the mood of the book, because you never know what it is that she can do or how she can save herself. So she asks to know how to play, and they say, well, you always have to tag somebody from the east side. And there are these squares called free lunch squares, that kind of a brown dirt square in the forest, which is if you're standing on it, they can eat you without having to tag you or anything. They can eat you right away. They don't have to wait for the game to be over. And so many other rules that honestly are really confusing. They touch like this mound that unleashes a big puff of smoke that they get penalized for. They get wrapped around by a bunch of snakes, and the beast appears and he says, "Oh my gosh, you get 60 points." And it's not clear what the points are for either. He says, "You'll get even more points if you get bitten." She says, "No, I don't want to be bitten." And then he sets her free, saying that was a stupid thing to do. Throughout the book, Ginger's hands get coated in different colors because of things that she touches. And then when she presents it to the beast, then he says, "Oh, wow, that's really good." And just really vague rules that no one really knows. So she spends the greater part of the book trying to tag somebody. Meanwhile, one of the twin brothers has gotten lost. So one twin brother in this time has escaped, and the other has been captured by now. She goes and she finds Pat, who was the one who ran away, and they still need to save Nat. So eventually, Ginger is able to tag one of the beasts, only to be tagged back shortly thereafter. But then when she comes with Pat, and Nat is still in the cage, captured, they say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were a level 3 player. We shouldn't be playing with you. You guys are too good." And so they let the children go, and they apologize. And nobody gets eaten, because the loser of the game, whoever is the beast at the end of the game, gets eaten. Nat, Pat, and Ginger are walking away, trying to find their campsite again. And they encounter another beast, and they say, "Hey, leave us alone. We're level 3. And then the beast says, "Oh, I'm a level 3 too. Tag, you're it." That's the end of the book. They just started another game. This book, at first, to me, seemed really, really stupid. Then they got into the explaining of the game initially, and they said, well, the loser is eaten. If you're the beast, by the end of the game, you lose, and we're going to eat you. And then automatically takes the scares up to an 11. This book had high suspense pretty much throughout the entire book. Ginger is playing a game that she doesn't understand, and her life depends on winning. This book has great monsters in it, it has great suspense to it, and really is quite a good book. Next up, we have A Shocker on Shock Street. So Erin and her best friend Marty, it starts off with them watching A Shocker on Shock Street movie, and they are having a good time with it. We find out pretty immediately that Erin is kind of a scaredy cat, and Marty is also just as much of a scaredy cat, but he never wants to admit it, and he always picks on Erin for it. And Erin's father is a mechanical genius. He designs theme parks, He's a special effects master. He's just finished designing a studio tour ride. And he says that Aaron and Marty are going to be the first people to test it out. So then they get to the ride, and then they're sent off on the ride. And from there, the book is just relentless with its scares. It's one after another after another. They ride through a haunted house that sounds honestly quite creepy. If I was on a ride like that, then I probably would be scared out of my wits. And then they come to this cave of the living creeps, which I don't really understand, but there are live bugs that drop down on them, and it scares the daylights out of them. And then they come to a cave with giant praying mantises. And as the book goes on, they're starting to think, I don't think that these are special effects. I think that these are real. Eventually, after the praying mantis incident, they get off of the tram, and then they start to walk. They walk into a graveyard, and then this was easily the scariest part of the book for me. Hands poke up out of the graves and start to try to drag Aaron and Marty down. And it is just super, super creepy, super scary. They escape that only to be confronted by Wolf Girl and her sidekick Wolf Boy. And then they see the tram that they were riding in is now full of skeletons. And it goes through a big, thick brick wall. There are just so many scary incidents. Again, this book is really relentless in its scares. So then at the end of the book, there's a director who yells, "Cut." And then they say, "Oh, you were in a movie the whole time. Didn't your dad tell you that we were filming your reactions?" They say, "No, we weren't told anything." And then they say, "Please just get us out of here. We don't want to be scared anymore. Just let us leave. Where's the way back to the main building?" And then the director, he says, "Okay, well, just go through that building over there." And that building that he points to is a house that shocks people who enter it. And they're killed instantly by millions of volts of electricity. And so they say, "Well, we don't want to go through that door." He says, "Don't worry, it's just a movie set." So Marty runs through there. Just as he's running to there, Erin sees that this movie director is a robot. She sees that he's plugged in by a big long wire. And so she says, "Oh my gosh, this man just lied to us. Marty is going to die in there." Marty runs into the building. She's unable to stop him in time. There's a big flash, and Marty is just laying on the ground. She runs over to try and help him. He's not moving. And then somebody runs in to help them. It turns out that it's her father. And so her father switches her off because she's not really his daughter. She's just a robot that was programmed to think of him as her father. And so the book ends with Dr. Wright, that's his name, Dr. Wright just taking the two robots back to his lab. This is a very good Goosebumps book. I used to be kind of intolerant of its twist ending, but honestly, in the context of the book, it works just fine. So rather than hating the twist ending, I actually kind of like it. I really can appreciate it. Now, this book, I would have ranked it much higher on the list if it wasn't for a lot of its failures. Despite it being so good, there are still things that really just drive me nuts about it. There are quite a few fake out scares, and the way that they defeat the mantises in the book is just kind of lame to me. They go to the mantises and they say, "Well, normally to get rid of bugs, you just step on them." And so they try stepping on the bugs and it works and they're able to escape. That to me is just, I really think that it should have been better. That tiny little aspect of the book just drives me nuts that they're able to defeat him that way. But very good book. And honestly, probably one of the scariest books in the entire series. And now next we have Say Cheese and Die. This book starts off with Greg and his friends going into what's called the Kaufman House. It's an abandoned house that has a lot of freaky stories behind it. There's a man who lives there, really strange man, whose name is Spidey. Well, that's what they call him anyway. And when they go in there, there's a vise that Greg sees. He turns the vise and he sees that it opens a little compartment, and in that compartment is a camera. He takes a picture of his friend who's posing, and then the picture comes up as his friend falling, and then moments after the picture develops, his friend falls. He says, well, that's really weird. He goes home, he takes a picture of his dad's new car. The picture comes out that the car is totaled. A few days later, of course, his father is in a terrible car accident. But not before we get a genuinely creepy moment where at the dinner table the dad says, let's all go for a ride out in the car after dinner tonight. You feel for Greg, who's trapped in the car, and you feel like the car is about to get wrecked, which thankfully it doesn't. And then he goes to another of his friends' baseball game, takes a picture of his friend in his baseball outfit, and the picture comes up that it's his friend laying on the ground with his neck bent in a very weird angle. And then he gets knocked to the ground and he's fainted with his neck at a weird angle. And it was at this point in the book that Greg was informed about the car accident that his father was in. And so Greg is now convinced that the camera is evil and he locks it up. But then his friend Sherry, she asked Greg to bring the camera to her birthday party. And he says, I really don't want to. She says, come on, it's fun. It takes those really weird pictures. And then he reluctantly brings it. He reluctantly takes a picture, and she's gone. Sherry says, well, you missed me. He says, no, there's the tree that you were standing next to. You're not in this picture. Then she says, well, try it again. Takes another picture, same thing. She's gone in the picture. Then moments later, she just vanishes. Nobody knows where she is. Now, this is my biggest problem with the book, is that Greg takes the pictures and he just rips them up and she comes back. I think if this thing is so easy to defeat, then it shouldn't really be all that scary. But the thing is, it is really that scary. So anyway, after all of this, they finally say, no, we shouldn't have this camera. It causes all these bad things to happen. We're going to return it. So they go back to the Kaufman house, and Spidey is there waiting for them. And he explains that he designed the camera, and he was evil, and he had a partner who was even more evil, actually into black magic. And he put a curse on the camera. And so now the camera is evil, and it does what it does. They take a picture of Spidey, and he gets so scared that he actually dies. He dies of fright. And then the picture comes up of Spidey dead of fright. And then they say, that's the last straw, let's return it and get out of here. They return the camera, and then a little while later, the bullies who were picking on Greg throughout most of the book come out with the camera. They take a picture of themselves, and the book ends with them standing around the picture waiting to see what develops. This book has a lot of really strong moments. It is up there with the really good Goosebumps books because it genuinely is sort of terrifying. A lot of the things that happen to the people who get their pictures taken is very gruesome and graphic. But this book does nearly everything right. It has genuine scares to it, and it is very well written. It's very suspenseful and exciting. It's got a great plot and great characters and a great twist ending too. Now, next is Attack of the Jackolanterns. So this book, you could call it an epic. It takes place over 3 Halloweens. The first Halloween that's described in the book, Drew and her friends were the victims of a really mean prank by these 2 kids, Tabitha and Lee. and they are honestly pretty mean to these poor kids. So they were at a Halloween party and they staged a break in that really scared them. The second year that's described in the book, they're both flashbacks, both of these previous years anyway. Drew had a Halloween party planned to get revenge from last year, but Tabby and Lee declined, saying that they wouldn't be able to make it. And so that resulted in their prank completely backfiring, and I think it burned a hole in their couch or something like that. And so then on the Halloween in the present, the Halloween on which this book actually takes place, they say, we are going to get them back this year, and we're going to get them back really good. Drew invites Tabitha and Lee to go trick-or-treating with her and her friends Walker, Shane, and Shayna. Drew, Walker, Lee, and Tabitha are all there on time. Shane and Shayna are nowhere to be seen. And so they go out trick-or-treating, and suddenly they're confronted by these two pumpkin heads, these two jack-o'-lantern people. And they take them into a neighborhood that nobody's ever seen, and they say, go ahead and trick-or-treat. And at first they say, wow, this place is really great. Look at all this candy that we're getting. But then the pumpkin heads demand them to keep going and to never stop, and to keep trick-or-treating forever. And so they keep on trick-or-treating, and a lot of the things that are described are extremely creepy to me, extremely scary to me. Like the jack-o'-lanterns, they're hovering after them all menacingly, their capes are flowing in the wind, fire is blowing out of their eyes. Then this whole secluded neighborhood, they all start to reveal that they have pumpkin heads also. Really disturbing stuff. Eventually, after the pumpkin heads put pumpkins on Tabitha and Lee's heads, then they lose their minds and they just run off. They're scared out of their minds. And then, of course, it's revealed that it was all part of the plan, the entire thing. It was Shane and Shayna who were the pumpkin heads, and that Drew and Walker were also in on it. Which, is kind of predictable, but it's not predictable in a way, to me, that hurts the book. Honestly, I was kind of hoping that that was the route that it would go, that it was part of the plan all along, and they were going along with it. I honestly kind of hoped that that was the ending. But then the part that still kind of bothers me about this book, when they're talking about it afterwards, they say that Shane and Shayna are actually aliens from another planet, and how helpful it was to have the aliens in order to pull those kinds of pranks. I don't really like it when aliens are involved in a story, but I think that this book did a pretty good job conveying terror. The book, honestly, is quite terrifying, and I think that this is definitely one of the higher up Goosebumps books. Next up is The Phantom of the Auditorium. So Brooke and her best friend Zeke get cast in this play called The Phantom. Supposedly the play is cursed. It was put on the year that the school was built, and the kid who was to play the Phantom fell and died, and nobody ever found his body. So pretty immediately they find this trap door, and they don't really know how safe it is. After rehearsal one day, they go down this trapdoor just to see what it's like. And they're caught by this man who says that he is the night janitor. His name is Emil. And he says, stay away from the trapdoor. Don't come back. We don't know that it's safe. And then he sends them on their way. There's this kid, Brian, who's new in town, and he really wants to be in the play. He wants to be in the production in any way that he can. There aren't any speaking roles, so he accepts a job as a techie, is what they're called. He's building sets and he's doing things like that. So Brooke, Zeke, and Brian sneak into the school at night. They see their piece of scenery and it's been vandalized. Right at that moment, Miss Walker coincidentally steps in. and she sees them next to the backdrop. So they go to their rehearsal the next time, and there's a phantom who swings down from the catwalk. He tells Brooke to go away and to stay away from his home. So everybody thinks that Zeke is responsible, and he eventually gets kicked out of the play because of it. He keeps getting blamed, and they say, "Enough is enough, Zeke," even though it's not him. Zeke is super bummed. He vows to catch the person who's been doing this. And so once again, they sneak into the school at night, and they go down the trap door. And then they find Emil, the one who claimed to be the night janitor. And he says, "Yes, I was the Phantom. I told you to stay away." And then the police get involved, and they conclude that Emil was a homeless man who found his home underneath the stage. And so then everything seems to be going okay after that. And then the night of the play comes, where they're finally going to perform the Phantom. Brooke is saying her lines, and then the Phantom rises up, and he starts saying things that aren't in the script. And after the Phantom is done with his soliloquy about how he died the night that the play was supposed to open, the audience thinks that it's really good, and Brooke grabs the Phantom's mask. She can't see who it is, but he falls back into the trapdoor that he entered on. The curtains close, and Zeke shows up, and he says, "What happened?" Well, everybody thought it was Zeke who was doing really good improvised lines, but it was actually the real Phantom. Brooke goes back to her locker, and she opens her locker, and a book falls out. It's a yearbook from the year that the school was built. And they flip through it, and they find the page talking about the theatrical production of The Phantom. So they look at the boy who was to star the Phantom, and it's Brian. This is, again, a very good Goosebumps book. It's not as scary as a few of the others that I mentioned before, but it is a very good book. It's very entertaining. It does have some scariness to it. It's a very good read, very good story. I'm kind of torn about the twist ending because, again, I don't like it when Stine makes his antagonists into not his antagonists. When there's this Phantom that's terrorizing the production, and then it turns out that the Phantom is just a homeless man, and that the real Phantom is just part of the twist ending. I think that this book could actually pull that off. Again, great book.